this peace pipe from, I guess, the first piece of assets that we're going to showcase from the Earthen parallel, the Earthen core, in this week's episode of Parallel, where we're covering Earthen and deck building. Get to review both Austin and Allie's decks that they put together as well. But welcome back to the Parallel team. And the RPD team for today. We've got most of our usual suspects, not subjects. But yeah, do you guys want to chat about what we're showing off here? I'm just gonna cycle through some of these assets.
Yeah, we got some cool stuff here. We got Gafar's Peace Pipe was the first one that you showed there. That was that the first ever Earthen card made? I mean, it was certainly, one of the first ever assets made for Parallel. It's part of the PS15, which is the very first 15 cards that were ever made. That was actually the one of two cards that I purchased in the pre-sale. So I thought it looked really cool. It was a pipe, it's like you gotta buy the pipe. But yeah, and it's like I ironically am probably not gonna end up playing too much Earthen, over my time playing, being a Marcolian, but love that card. Super iconic. I would say it's one of the more iconic cards in the Parallel collection. It's kind of become infamous. I think you just showed the Kamui mask as well. This is really cool. There's a card called Kamui Protector, and this was one of the early explorations around, Earthen's like headwear and apparel. And so that mask we actually had created in AR and put it in a snap filter too, and you could sort of don the mask in AR, which is pretty neat. But Kamui Protector, that's the one, Koji, you're talking about, right? He's riding a bear, so it's pretty neat.
That's awesome.
And then I think you showed another one there, but yeah, these are a lot of sort of pieces of world building. You can see another type of Earthen mask there, and here we have the fly through of Crimea. This is sort of Earthen home base, right? And the lore for Earthen is interesting because they're the only faction that didn't leave the planet. And so there's sort of this naturalism that's associated with Earthen. Obviously, it's implied in the name, but there is a sort of sage quality that they have, more meditative, right? More connected to nature and earth. And, strategically, they are protectors, right? And thus there's a very defensive character that they have. And that kind of is where the lore ties in with the functions of the Parallel and the functions of the cards. So, they had effectively been able to survive the cataclysm that took place on Earth. A small portion of the population who were capable of surviving. One of the common themes that comes up is you see vitiligo on the skin of a lot of Earthen characters, which is associated with this sort of rare genetic predisposition to be able to survive, the conditions that were on Earth after the cataclysm. So this is part of the kind of lore and just backstory of who they are and why they are the way that they are. And that small, percentage of the population that survived ended up continuing to flourish in the years that would come after. So I think one important thing to mention that maybe people are still curious about is in the base set, it's kind of the more rudimentary technology of Earthen that is being explored. But some of what you would see in Planetfall, and going forward, is that the Earthen do possess technology, and they make use of technology to an extent. And we haven't really seen too much of that technology, but between sort of some of the explorations in the Avatar collection and some of the things you'd see going forward, you would see more of that technology. So I think there's been some questions about that. How do they stack up technologically? Sometimes it feels like Marcolian's much more advanced technologically than all the rest of them. And I think there's actually a lot more parity than one would naturally assume. It's just kind of building up the layers of each of the parallels. And the layer to establish with the Earthen was a little bit more of that naturalism first. So.
Yeah, it seems like we're seeing both of those masks as well in a few of these key art pieces. In terms of, I guess, playstyle, what would you say that their edge kind of is?
Yeah, Rebel, do you want to take a stab at that one?
I think Koji, you may be a better person to ask because you
man.
largely designed the Earthen, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Well, what
That's
is
why
their
they're so broken.
yeah. What is their play style? Well, I think inadvertently there's a bit of a control element to it for sure. They are very defensive. The goal is basically outlast for the most part. They're kind of top heavy with their strongest units and effects, and so the idea is basically just stave off the early attacks until you can get the enough energy in your bank, 8, 9, 10, somewhere in that neighborhood, and just like start throwing out giant threats that people can't really deal with, and then win the game. But yeah, it is again, it inadvertently kind of became a bit of a more control heavy situation because they're also the only ones with healing. We're not the only ones, but like a lot of what they do involves healing, so it allows you to sort of slow the pace of the game down a lot more than some of the other parallels. And so we have seen some pretty wacky stuff emerge with the Earth, and it's pretty. I mean, again, it suits my style, but like some people are just like, if you're just gonna beat me, just beat me. And I'm like, no. Let me draw this out like literally as long as possible. If you wanted to draw Magic the Gathering comparison, I would say it's kind of like a white-green sort of scenario. Yeah.
One thing I also want to bring up, because we talked about last time assault as the sort of Markolian specific keyword. The Earthen have access to a keyword called pacify, or pacifist, basically applying pacifist to another unit, which means that they're no longer able to attack. You can use them for other things. If they have defender, you can defend with them, but it helps Earthen slow the game down and allow them to get to that late game that they're looking for before they can murder you.
Right. They also have a very high population of units with defender, I would say, compared to those other parallels. So
yeah, I find that like when I'm playing against Earthen with Markolian, it's one of the most frustrating combinations. You can certainly beat it, but it takes a lot of the wind out of your sails, and it does that because let's say that I do have a Lancer or Earthbreaker out there and they get pacified. I just have this dead weight unit that I spent, significant resources on, and then they might still have two, pretty beefy defenders. And it's like, how am I going to get rid of these? Obviously I have an eye, I have things, but yeah, you run out of ways to resolve things or continue to keep pressure pretty quick.
It's almost worse having your unit pacified versus destroyed, because it just now sits and stares at you, able to do nothing.
Yeah, and God forbid you forget, that it's pacified, and then whatever you're trying to do that turn, relying on that not being pacified, is now completely ineffective. That's happened to me before. So
I'll just add one other thing in really quick, and then we can go on to the deck building portion. But a lot of the game was basically designed thematically first and then functionally second. And so, we came up with the idea of the Earthen and them being the ones left on Earth. And because all the other parallels are coming from outside of Earth, it was natural for us to kind of come up with a defensive narrative for them. And so that's where the defender keyword came from. And the idea of the pacifist was basically, if they're defenders and they don't really like to attack, they treasure life over everything, basically, then they would treasure other parallels lives as well. And so how do you take a unit out of a fight without killing it? And it actually came from the Peace Pipe and Gafar himself, because the idea was basically like he would sit down with somebody and like, again, thematically sit down with somebody and smoke a pipe with them and whatever, and teach them the ways, and thus they would become pacified. They wouldn't want to fight anymore. And so even the parallel of Gafar, the idea, his ability basically says like when he's attacked by another unit, it pacifies them. And the idea is they would meet in the battlefield, and he might take some damage from that other unit, but then be like, hey, here, this is the Earthen way. Like, let's not fight anymore. And then that unit stops fighting, basically. So yeah, the sort of narrative informed the mechanics, at least at first, and then the game was horribly unbalanced. But we're past that
now. I think that answers Fat Danderson's question about what's in the pipe as well. Pretty obvious. So.
Yeah. Hey guys. I know I'm excited to see kind of the decks that our team kind of built and talk more about that. But I'm just wondering, like maybe from the lore side standpoint, if we can talk a little bit about like, do the Earthen know about the other parallels? Like, do they know about each other, or because they were the ones that survived the cataclysm, right? And so maybe a little bit there on the lore, and like, are they aware that the priming's happening and other parallels are coming home? Like maybe a little bit of context there for people deep into it like myself.
It's a great question. Yeah,
I
Rebel,
think-
do you want to take a stab?
Sure. Yeah, I think some probably do. Some definitely do, but I think at least when I think about Earthen, like I try to imagine what Earth would actually look like 10,000 years after whatever this event is. You probably have, a bunch of different societies that are nearly as diverse as Earth is today. So I try not to like think of Earthen as just like one bucket. And so I think it gives us a lot of flexibility to say like, yeah, some know that there's other stuff out there. Maybe some Earthen societies are more technologically advanced than others and can detect what's out there or can communicate with what's out there. Maybe we have a bit of a storyline where sometime in the past an Ogden core ship basically crash lands on Earth and teaches a group of the Earthen basically how to use sort of flight technology. So there's going to be sort of fun stories that emerge throughout the narrative that we'll touch on that.
Yeah, we saw that in the first comic too, right? We saw, different tribes. We saw Shamak, we saw Harahi going to, Crimea. Crimea is obviously a distinct community from those two. So, we already have this idea developing of these different communities, and certainly some are more exposed to, technology and thus other parallels, and some are less. And, you have to imagine too, thinking about this story. Certainly this wouldn't, the priming wouldn't be the only time there would have been curiosity about Earth amongst the other parallels. Now, some of them are more far flung. Obviously, you have Ogden core is, getting out there into the solar system. The Shroud are sort of, in some way sort of tethered to the singularity, in some way not. But you have, Marcolian at minimum, certainly not too far away, possessing of technology that would be able to sort of scout and scan. And so those, and, Cathari too, right? So those things do get explored, and we certainly will see more of the active interest, prior to even the priming of some of these parallels.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. I remember playing a lot of StarCraft growing up, and this is like before we had reliable internet. BattleNet, like through dial-up, was bad, right? So I played a lot of campaign mode, and I felt like that was a really good way for the lore to be like taught to me, and like that really like made me a huge super fan. I'm wondering if you could talk about, or if you have any thoughts high level on how like distributing that lore, maybe outside of the comics, but maybe through gameplay or different styles of gameplay. Have you thought about that? Is there anything you can tell us about different versions here that will serve as a vehicle to kind of tell this deep story a little more?
So we definitely have some designs on a more single player oriented version of the game that would be sort of a deck builder type mode where you're kind of going through and earning chunks of cards at a time, basically like small packs, and then kind of building your deck from there and getting some passive abilities until you're either dead or you've created a god tier deck, and then make your way through that. And the idea, it's called sectors, and the idea is you would start on a map of Earth and maybe the surrounding space, and you can kind of travel around and get some idea as to what's happening in these different areas. So like, the asteroid belts would be the Ogden core territory, Mars would obviously be the Marcolians, etc. And so you could dig up little pieces of lore there. But that mode, we're still kind of working on it, so it won't be available immediately. But the idea is to meter out some of the more narrative structure there. I mean, we kind of touched on it last time we spoke, but it's a little bit difficult in a card game to really tell the story in that way, because you have no control over when players are going to see which cards. And so it's kind of a mix unless you can shoehorn them into a more steady single player mode, but that doesn't really lend itself to card games as well. So it is kind of a fine balance. I think that a lot of the sort of surrounding material will be the core elements in which you would get the story. So, the comic being one of them, any other sort of narrative pieces of media that we come out with later. I got to be careful what I say here, but that will also maybe tell some stories. So, who knows? Things will come for sure.
Say it.
No, I think
I'm not that tired.
Yeah, he got harassed last time for dropping too much alpha. So you guys need to be careful, poking him too much. But I think one other thing that's interesting and probably we can say is that the avatars are an exploration of this. I think we've mentioned that, right? The avatars go deeper into the visual universe of every parallel, right? I mean, you're going to see more types of earthen clothing than you've ever seen, more types of shroud clothing, different forms of headdress, different types of weapons that you haven't seen. Some weapons that you have seen, but weapons that you haven't, right? And like I said, the earthen technology set, does include weapons that aren't swords. And, we're exploring that. And that's something that you're likely going to see with avatars as well. So I think the actual creation of real characters in the parallel universe via avatars is another form of exploration of the depth of each parallel and a form of storytelling. And so, as Koji mentioned, there's other kinds of media that will be created that are more explicitly narrative driven, but people will notice the details in the Avatar collection and realize, wow, there's actually a lot of lore building that happened in this exercise. It's pretty impressive overall, in terms of thinking about styles that different types of earthen would wear, thinking about more of the minutia of companions or weapons that Augencor would wield. All these things are explored in pretty tremendous depth. And so I think that's actually probably, other than comic number 2, the biggest near-term exploration of lore is the avatars themselves.
You just blew their minds, Fitch.
Did I?
No, I love that. No, I can keep
Everyone's
talking
at a
about
loss
it.
for words.
Yeah, I can keep talking about it. I just want to let these other big brains on our side do their thing, because I know that's what we're here to do. But I love the lore and the artwork. So thanks for sharing that stuff, guys. And
somebody in the chat mentioned WoW Cataclysm too. I used to play WoW, so I'm I can appreciate Tauren Druid, good times, and I enjoyed those times.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so I'm not sure if we want to jump into some of the cards next and walk through them, and then we can look at Austin and Allie's decks after that.
Yeah, Koji, do you want to start with Paragons here and then work our way?
Sure. I mean, maybe we talk about the Paragons and then we just jump into the decks and we can talk about the cards that are in those decks. Let me just pull up my info here because I don't want to get the wording wrong. We've changed the wording on some of this stuff so often that I'm going to give you a function that's outdated, I think. But I mean, Earthen's number 1 Paragon, I would say, is probably Gafar. He is the, I guess, leader. I don't know. I don't know how it came to be, but we've kind of bestowed him the title of the leader of Earth, basically. But he's basically sort of happy, peace-loving. I don't know, guy. I wonder if you can find the image to put up there while I'm looking for the card, and for some reason I can't find the card. But basically, there he is smoking his little pipe there.
Yeah.
Basically, the idea here is that. Oh my God! Sorry, I'm having trouble finding the card. There we go.
You want me to do it?
No, I've got it. So, his passive is whenever a unit gets pacified, all other units on your side of the board get +1/+1. So 1 attack and 1 health. And so he's kind of promoting the slightly more controller style of play where you're disabling your opponent's attackers. And when he hits the field, he himself is pacified, so he can't actually attack, but he has defender. So that means if you are attacked or one of your other units are attacked, he can step in front of that attack. And when he does that, any unit that he defends against is also pacified. So basically, your opponent's attackers can only kind of attack into him once before being disabled. And when he does that, of course, he buffs all units with all units on your side of the board. So he himself would get a buff, and all the other units that you have would get a buff. And he's kind of promoting again this sort of slow, methodical style of play. He's a 4 cost with 0. He starts with 0 attack and 8 health. And again, that's kind of thematic. Like we didn't want him to do any damage to any of the other units on the outset. So he's no attack and meets the attacker's arms open on the battlefield and pacifies them. The next one is Shoshana. And fun fact, actually, Shoshana is not quite, but sort of an inside joke named after my daughter. So there's that. But her ability is when she hits the field, she sets your current health to 30. So wherever your health is, it goes back up to 30 or down to 30 potentially, because she allows you to you set your starting and maximum health to 40. So you get a bit more health there. Now, a key card with Shoshana, because she's all about manipulating life totals, is a card called Life Vault, which basically allows you. Oh wait, I don't know what it does now. It's changed, but basically keys on how much health you have and allows you to play a bunch of key cards in order to try and win the game. But her idea is again outlast. But rather than pacifying units, all the things that sort of work with Shoshana are about healing yourself, healing your units, etc. And it works really well with another mechanic that we actually didn't mention that the Earthen have, which is decay. Basically, what decay does, it says that the unit that has decay and any adjacent units at the beginning of your turn take 1 damage. Now, obviously, that sounds terrible. Why would you want to do that? And the answer is because there are other things that you can put in your deck that key on A, when units are healed, or B, when units take damage. So as an example, there's an Earthen unit that whenever it takes damage, it does 1 damage to a random enemy target. Now, you imagine having 2 of those beside a unit with decay. Every turn, it's just going to be firing off random shots. And then if you had another unit that keys on a healing ability, you could heal all those units back up to full health and you reap the rewards, basically. And so that's sort of the Shoshana playstyle. And the last one is, oh my God, help me.
Nehemiah.
Sorry guys. I'm speaking of my daughter. I said this off mic before we started, but I had one of the worst nights of my life last night. So my head is in a gray fog. So apologies, but yeah.
Yeah, we got Nehemiah next.
Yeah. So Nehemiah, her passive is you can't. Oh, sorry, that's not the right card. Oh my God, somebody take over from me. I'm butchering this whole thing.
All right,
Yo,
so
you're crushing it, man. You're crushing
no,
it.
yeah,
All
you
good.
are crushing it.
We're just here to have a good combo. Don't worry about it, man.
Her card, by the way, the art is so sick. Like, that's got to be one of my favorite.
That's a cool action shot.
Yeah, she's really doing some damage there, you know.
Yeah.
Female.
So
she looks like she can fuck shit up.
Yeah,
and she can.
Yeah, definitely. That's the other probably most played.
She's actually my favorite Earthen Paragon because I like her playstyle quite a bit. So her passive is the first time each turn a friendly unit with defender is destroyed, give another friendly unit defender. So your own life total is very hard to get to. And she has a really cool active ability. When you play her to the field, she's a 4 cost 0/5. But while she's on the field, all other units with defender deal damage equal to their health instead of their attack. So Earthen has a lot of high health units with defender. And when Nehemiah is on the board, they become very threatening.
And I would say that they also just have a lot of high health units in general. So with Nehemiah, you can transfer defender onto some of those other high health units and just punch your opponents in the face.
Yeah, Bobbin's in the chat saying I can take over. I gotta say, absolutely blowtorched me with an Earthen deck the other day, like crushed. Wasn't even close. So that felt real bad. But shout out to Bobbin. Yeah, do we want to? Speaking of decks, do we want to dive in a little bit and see what you guys came up with?
Yeah, let's do it.
Allie, do you want to go first?
Sure, I can go first if you like. How are we displaying the deck, or are we just discussing?
I think Rich, you got a visual. Yeah, you can
Yeah,
pull
let me
up.
see. I'll hide us just so that we're.
Yeah, and I think we can just talk about, what the thought process was.
Hide us. I wore this Hawaiian shirt for nothing. God damn it.
I'll zoom in and move around. If that's better?
Sounds good. I just want to say I'm still in the process of finding my home, and I feel like Earthen is a very big contender. So
Okay.
by the end of this series, I will find my home because I haven't decided yet.
Oh, interesting.
But I definitely very much like Earthen.
What about it, Allie? What is there something specifically that calls to you?
I guess I like nature, and I think the infusion of technology and nature is really cool. The whole solar punk theme, if you've heard of solar punk, I love that. So I feel like
Oh my God.
just
That's
direct
very
reference.
much, very much Earthen for sure.
Kalos just lost his absolute mind right now. He rants about solar punk stuff all the time, and half the people are like, "What the hell are you talking about, Jesse?"
Yeah.
I'm so happy you knew the word for it, because that's the trajectory that I want to go. Just I don't know, my own branding and stuff like that. So I don't know. Earthen might be the one for me.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah. So yes, I built it around Gafar, and my general idea, because of the passive ability, whenever a unit gains pacifist, all friendly units gain +1/+1. The idea is to get on board fairly quickly to start taking, advantage of the +1/+1 counters. So, I tried to put in little units and stuff like that. So the shielded assassin, this unit cannot be targeted by the enemy's effects. So, the idea is to beef up this wall essentially of minions, and then at the end there are finishers that say, get rid of the pacifist ability, so then you can bonk your opponent in the face, or make trades or whatever. So I guess some of the key cards: Change of Heart, unit of your choice gains pacifist, so you can either do that to your own minions or to your opponents to slow them down. And again, the ticker would go off. I did have a question on the wannabe warlord. When is it? So it reads whenever a unit gains pacifist. So obviously, if you're targeting with a spell giving pacifist, it's going to trigger the +1/+1. But does it also trigger if the wannabe warlord just comes into play with pacifist?
No. So there's a few units that have pacifist printed on them, and it doesn't. It doesn't key when they hit the field.
Okay, that might adjust some of the cards that I have in here, but the general strategy, is the same. I definitely like defender units, so the Ardent Negotiator seems like a really good one. When this unit defends and survives, return the attacking unit to its owner's hand. Let's see, what's another? The Primea Conduit. Looks like a fairly flexible card, and it has defender, so it's a 1 cost with the muster ability. Spend the remaining energy from your bank. This unit's attack and health become equal to the amount of energy spent. So if you need to get on board quickly, you can drop that, or in late game you can make it a beat boy, I suppose.
So real quick, I think the wannabe warlord, just so people know who are listening, it's actually not a bad card for the deck, because if you can buff it big enough, it's like a monster. Basically, what it is a 0/1 that has pacifist, but if its attack goes over 10, it gets armed. It can attack twice a turn. It ignores defender, and when it attacks, you draw a card. Yeah. So if you could defend it with other defenders and pacify units and constantly buff it to 10 attack, you probably, you'll probably win.
Yeah, it seems like it could be really flexible. So definitely like it. Then I keep it in there, I suppose. Yeah, I wasn't sure the Mizra loyalist. So when Mizra when Mizra loyalist takes damage, all friendly units named Mizra loyalist on the field in your hand or in your deck gain +1/+1. Like I was a little worried that I wasn't going to have enough minions to take advantage of Gafar's passive ability. So the fact that that one can keep buffing itself, I suppose, seemed like a decent choice, but I'm not sure.
Probably the most frustrating OP card in the Earthen deck right now. It is actually ridiculous. Like the game that I referenced where Bavin just completely destroyed me, Mizra was the culprit, and it's so pesky. It's like you try and get rid of it, and if you don't have enough firepower to get rid of it, or you don't have great removal units, which certain decks don't have that many, then you are just in a really, really deep situation very quickly. And I mean, it'll be 12-12 like before you know it. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
So I mentioned I mentioned oh my god, again, the fatigue is killing me, but the ability that does damage to the unit and the units adjacent to it, decay, just come to me. This is like a prime target for that, right? Because if you put it beside a unit with decay, it's going to take 1 damage, but it's also going to gain a health and an attack. So it's buffing every other Mizra loyalist that you own, basically, right? And so you get the early one out beside a decay unit, and it just like ticks away. And so the next ones you play are just that much bigger.
Yeah, hate it. Can't stand it.
I was on the right track then, if that's a really good card.
Definitely.
Yeah, I guess talking about some of the late game finishers, the Rhetorician, saying that right? On your turn, you may waste a banked card to cause your units to lose pacifist until the end of turn. So again, at this point in the game, hopefully you've built up some minions that have a lot of counters on them, and then you can drop that to make them battle ready. Another really cool card, Jonah the Undecided. It's a legendary unit with Defender. When this unit defends and survives, put a counter on it. If there are 3 or more counters on this unit, choose one of the following options. All units on the field gain pacifist, or all units on the field lose pacifist. So this is obviously like key card for any pacifist deck. You can use it defensively if you need to, or you can use it aggressively, I suppose. What else? The Gaia's Call is a pretty cool relic. Also, just it might be unnecessary for this deck, but if you felt like you needed more value, it reads, at the start of your turn, put a counter on this card. When there are 3 or more counters on it, destroy this relic and put any units in your bank onto the field. These units gain battle ready and ignore pacifist until the end of turn. So, if you've been banking a lot of cards, you kind of get like a big fill the board turn for a lot of pressure, I guess, in case your pacifist stuff wasn't doing enough. But I don't know that would be the case because it seems pretty strong. And then, just filled out a little bit of, cleanse the earth. So, some effects that could help you answer things in case you're getting overwhelmed. That just reads, return an enemy unit to the opponent's hand. If you have less than 10 health, return 2 instead. So if you play Hearthstone, it's kind of like a sap. Yeah, that's the general idea.
You got Sky Scout there as well. That's another card that makes its way into a lot of decks.
Which
Very
one
pesky.
Guys,
Arissa Sky Scout.
Oh, yes. That one just has pacifist naturally. For cost energy 4/5. Yeah, when this unit takes damage, reveal an enemy banked card. Just seemed like decent stats, and I feel like it would be nice to have a lot of defender units in this because obviously if your units can't attack, you need to be able to, use the defender ability.
Yeah, I mean, pretty good. I feel like I should get the code and try the deck and see how it goes. But like, it feels like it might play well. The one thing I'd be afraid of is removal. I guess that's what Change of Heart is for. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it seems pretty solid. probably better than I could build. So there you go.
I had like a couple annihilates in there. Like maybe you get overwhelmed and you need to put more removal in. And like I said, I was worried about not having enough minions, but honestly, I've got 3 copies of a lot of minions in here. So you could shave them off and put in some removal tools.
The one other big sort of Earthen card that appears in a lot of decks if you plan to go super late game is Tane, which is basically like a semi-unkillable giant unit.
Yeah.
And that's kind of one that we see anyone who kind of plans to go to the end and do a big swing. You put that in there as kind of an insurance policy, because I think it's if it dies, it comes back like 2-3 turns later. So
we'll see him in a little bit.
Oh, there you go. Oh,
Nice.
teaser.
Yeah, the other card, Kalos would be remiss if we didn't mention the Cape of Charmahal. He's a big fan of the Cape of Charmahal. So that's one that does find its way into a lot of decks that just really will piss you off. When the upgraded unit would be destroyed, fully heal this unit instead, and then destroy this card. So it's just a, come back from the dead free card, essentially. And again, one of those things where sometimes you don't notice that it's been played. It sounds silly, but that literally happens.
Really good with Mizra as well, yeah.
Yeah, with Mizra too. It's just these combinations of like defenders and buffing and decay and all this stuff. It's an eclectic play style, but like it can be extremely powerful.
Yeah, Ali, maybe a question to you for folks who aren't as versed in TCG games. I know like you haven't played the game, but you clearly are experienced enough to put something together you think could work, so that we could talk about. Maybe like what are some things that people, as we're building our own decks with less experience than you, what are some pointers you might have for people building their first decks that may have less experience with traditional trading card games, as we're kind of doing this blind going into the alpha?
I would say it's important to fill out your deck with like a good curve. Like if you see really fancy high cost cards, like if you're just putting a bunch of bombs into your deck, you're going to get run over in the early game. So I feel like you got to make sure that, depends on the style of the deck. And like, I guess that's the first thing that you should think about is like, what is my objective? What's the win condition? Think on the macro first, and then try to fit in tools that are going to help you get there. That might seem quite basic, but sometimes it's easy to lose the macro, I feel like, if you're just excited about the individual cards. So if you are wanting to play the fun late game bombs and stuff like that, you're probably going to need healing or ways to clear the board, or like survivability tools. And if you're playing an aggressive deck, you want to make sure that you're having a lot of low cost units, and hopefully you have ways to refill your hand. Sometimes aggressive styles like don't have a ton of card draw to kind of slow them down. But yeah, I think there's just like certain categories of cards like card draw, AoE, value, whatever, that you just need to put into your deck and figure out what your objective is.
I was taking notes.
That's good.
Hopefully
Yeah,
that
He's not joking. He actually needs them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That was a good deck. That was a good deck. It's cool to hear your thought process putting it together, and like, how does it compare to maybe decks that you might build in Hearthstone. I can hear some of that language and thinking coming over, so it's pretty neat, and it's cool to see people organically, without playing the game, identify cards that are really key and become really I would say staples of decks. Mizra is such an obvious example, but there was a lot of identifying of the key strategies in there that was really cool.
So what's your if you had to draw an analog to a Hearthstone deck or play style or what have you, what would you say Earthen is?
Ooh, that's interesting. I feel like maybe with Shoshana, like Druid, like, I mean, which is funny because druids are obviously nature themed, but I feel like perhaps druid could be there. With the gaining +1/+1 kind of stuff, like board buffs, like perhaps paladin, maybe. I would say that there's so many different, like within one class, and same thing with parallel here. It seems like there's different ways to play a class, in multiple ways. So I would say maybe druid. That would be my first pick.
Okay. I mean, I don't have an answer to that question, so
Okay.
I'm just curious as to what other
was a
people.
I don't know how much Hearthstone
You
you've played.
failed.
I'll have to just play and see. I think that's one thing, is that making the deck has made me. I mean, I was already excited to play, but I'm anxious to put this to the test and see if it sucks or not. So yeah.
Can't wait to get beat down by total newcomers to the game. It's like it's not even gonna matter. It'll take 5 games, and then we're gonna be in a world of hurt. So
We shall see.
Yeah, a little internal stuff here. Austin and Allie, they actually played in a different TCG game that people might know today, and so we have our own. Austin's got his own.
Yeah, we have internal
pedigree here. We got I'm excited to see these battles play out.
yeah.
When Allie met Austin is the internal joke.
Austin's clearly 1-0, so I've got to
I think parallels
my
are game.
revenge.
he's a sleeper, I can tell. He's quiet but deadly.
So we've got his
Yeah.
deck up now. If he wants to talk through his, Austin, I have your split between 2 images.
Yeah.
So just let me know.
Yeah, we can start with the low end, and then we'll jump into the higher end stuff. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
So my vibe here is Earthen feels very like green in Magic. I think there's some like +1/+1 synergies that could like go white, like Koji mentioned. But I actually was building with the Paragon, Hemia, and so and she's very reminiscent of 2 different Magic cards. There's Arcades, and there's also Doran the Siege Shield. Both let you actually swing with your power in Magic. And so with that in mind, there's like, there's even like decks that are currently being played in like Modern in Magic. I think Gabriel Nassif, shout out to one of the better pros and one of my favorites, put together a deck that relies on Arcades and is actually able to swing with toughness on creatures, and they actually would lose their defender. Obviously that doesn't happen here because defender is like a different ability in parallel, but some very similar vibes. And so I had a lot of fun looking at some of the stuff with like grit or toughness, and then looked at some other synergies around there as well. One of the ones that stood out was actually Decay. I think Decay is a really interesting mechanic. It lets you work really hard on like the Miser Loyalist. Like I think like that stood out, of course. Spores is another important card that gives all of your creatures or units, I should say, decay. And so there's like synergies and like buffing your units. A lot of the units that I was trying to play like drew more cards for you. And there's also some like, yeah, go ahead, Koji.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, but real quick, Spores is also important because it gives all units decay, including your opponent's units. So if they're not, playing a decay synergistic deck, it's just going to slowly erode their army.
Yeah, and just for anyone that doesn't know, decay deals 1 damage every turn to your creatures, and the ones that are adjacent to it if it's on one of your creatures. So pretty interesting. It's kind of like a board wipe mechanic in a way. Earthen doesn't really have a lot of board wipes, and it doesn't really have a lot of removal, and so you need like big creatures to get in the way of stuff. And so that was kind of the focus of the deck. So I also have Cleanse the Earth, just 2 copies, and then I do have some Annihilates in here, but you can't see them on the screen yet. But I think Earthen's looking kind of hard for like that must answer. I have Memento of the Fallen. I don't think that's a card that we've talked about, but with like a decay synergy deck, I think that's like a really cool idea that when one of your creatures dies, it gets another counter, and then you put it on one of your other creatures and then they get bigger. And so that just kind of like plays into the whole theme as well. Sorry guys, stop me whenever, but just riffing on some of the things I was thinking about.
No, I like it. You're explaining it better than I did, and I made the cards. So yeah,
No, no,
Yeah,
no.
keep going.
Someone in Discord was saying they're serious card players. So evidently there's knowledge being dropped here. It's working.
Yeah,
I also, sorry, real quick, I have to say I didn't just make the cards. Big shout out to Connor and Carson, Connor especially for rounding this all out. I don't want to take credit for my team's work, but yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, for sure. Some of the other really cool cards. So just getting back to that decay synergy, the Hallowed Burial Ground is just this other really interesting card that whenever one of your units dies, you actually get like a defender wall for a turn that comes back. Has pacifist, it can't attack, and it has. But when you have Nehemi on the field, like your walls essentially will have damage and like be defending, and so like that's a really cool synergy that exists as well. And then finally, like the Kamui Protector is another one. So whenever it's damaged or an adjacent unit takes damage, which would play well into decay, you get to play one of these out of your deck for free. And that's pretty awesome. They're 3/6, so pretty sizable. And then if Nehemi's on the field, obviously they're swinging for a pretty good amount. You have Jonah, which again, if she's on the field, is a 0/8. Pretty powerful and like, you know, just a lot of utility like Ali mentioned. And then I do have Tane in this deck because I do think that you can reliably build your way up there. And then you're potentially swinging with like an unkillable 12/12 over time. And at a minimum, I mean, he still has 9 power. So pretty awesome there. So yeah, that's kind of was the focus, was a little bit more decay focused. I threw in some other like one of fun ofs. I put in like a saboteur. I don't know how relevant that's going to be with like relics in other people's decks, but I always like to have some like silver bullets is like kind of how we would refer to them. And then Star Chart reminds me a lot of there's a card in Magic called Sylvan Library. It's a little bit different. It lets you actually have the option to put more cards in hand in exchange for life, but being able to dig 3 deep and pick what cards you want to draw every single turn feels pretty strong. So those are were my test cards and like cards I wanted to raise. Not that I'm sure they're good or not in this deck, but anyway, that's kind of the deck I put together.
Yeah, what's the thoughts, guys?
I really like it, and I think that Saboteur is a pretty great silver bullet, because if you don't have any relic answers, you could find yourself in potential big trouble. Like, I mean, imagine facing off against Ali's deck or a modified version of Ali's deck where she's building around Gaia's Call, and so she's actually just dumping a ton of strong units into her bank early because, you know, you can't play an 8-cost unit at the beginning of the game, 10-cost unit at the beginning of the game. You're just dumping them into your bank and then playing Gaia's Call. If you can't stop it from popping off, you're probably going to die. So you probably need at least a couple relic removals in there. But yeah, overall, I mean, it seems pretty solid. It seems like you got the gist of the defender bit of it, and of course the decay. Miser Loyalist, I'm happy to see it in both of your decks, because it is sort of, I mean, you guys probably keyed it as like one of the stronger cards in the deck. It doesn't seem so crazy, but it becomes you know, an absolute powerhouse if left unchecked. So yeah, I think you guys got it all nailed, and I love seeing Memento of the Fallen in there too, because it's just kind of a fun reoccurring card, very hard to get rid of.
Yeah, really quick, I missed 2 cards that I should mention for sure that feel pretty essential in strategy. But Malachite Shield, giving +1/+4 defender, and then whenever you're hitting a player, you can see what they're banking up. That was relevant on some other cards, but just because Ali and I haven't had the chance to play yet, it's hard to determine like how important that knowledge is. I know there are some other cards that let you potentially like draw cards if you know what's in your opponent's like banked cards, or there's like some information. If you know some amount of the banked cards, I think that you get different effects. But something to highlight, and then Rain-Soaked Mourner, actually, whenever it dies, I think if it dies of decay, it deals 3 damage across the board or something. So some interesting cards. It was a lot of fun. Appreciate you guys taking a peek. I'm sure we missed some things, but it'll be fun to play test and get our hands dirty with it.
This looks like a super tight deck list to me. I'm gonna steal this one for one and definitely try it out.
Let me know.
Yeah.
I think they both looked really, really good. I mean, again, like the key cards were in there. Key like understanding of the strategies was there, and both of them had like clearly articulable ways to win the game. And like definitely having played and had my ass kicked by Earthen, a lot of that stuff that you guys clued in on was that's how you lose to Earthen. They do pesky things with putting defenders out there, getting those defenders to buff, leveraging decay or not, pacifying your units, all those things you guys covered in great detail. The cape is another interesting card that I think is just worth mentioning that we talked about. But otherwise, it was like pretty comprehensive. I think there's one card that Kalos likes, Revitalizing Growth. That's another one that's interesting. But yeah, otherwise it's pretty much all there, right?
Most card gamers will not like that card.
Yeah, I know. But it's again, we got to mention it. He loves his cape, he loves his growth.
Yeah, I mean that's probably more relevant in a Shoshana deck anyway.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I mean the thing that I love about seeing both these decks is it's like immediately apparent to me that like people who have knowledge of card games, are going to be able to put together some pretty decent decks at the outset, and it's like exactly kind of what I wanted because I don't know, as a card game fan myself, I always wonder like the stuff that we design, like is it going to make sense to the people that like the games that I like or whatever, and it seems like you guys are there. So
it's also really cool to see two very different Earthen decks that each had a very cohesive strategy. So really cool to see that.
For sure. That was intelligible. I know Danny asked Ali this, but quickly, when it comes to deck building, I like to use Ali's point of checking curve as like an audit. So you almost want to see what your curve is at the end. So like, I like to find really cool synergies. I want to find all of the cool things that I can do with a set of cards, and then I want to make smart choices after. So I almost like let my excitement run first and like throw all the big expensive things or all the cool stuff, and then I start trimming. And then it requires you to be pretty disciplined when you're going through that. So and I think her points were incredibly pertinent on know your role in a matchup. And like Earthen seems like it's trying to win the long game, and so it reminds me of like battle. We call it battle cruiser Magic, but it's like mid range to late game Magic. It's probably not a true control deck since it's like unit reliant. You're not probably winning that way necessarily in the long run, but you are trying to like gum up the board early, play stuff that's just flat bigger than your opponents, and then hopefully win the game at the end. And so it was a lot of fun to build with, and I think coming from other card games, I think this is definitely intelligible for like a Magic player or Hearthstone player, Skyweaver player, you name it. I think there's like a lot of similarities to those games, which is helpful. And then there's also some really unique, cool synergies that I'm excited to try that I don't think you necessarily see elsewhere. So it's super cool.
Yeah, Austin, I was going to ask you that question. Who don't know, Austin is on our core team with Rich and myself, and he basically diligences all our TCGs, and he breaks every game, and that dude's still tough. We've heard.
Sorry, Danny, you're a little robotic. Can you try again?
Yeah, sorry. Can you hear me? Is this better?
Yeah.
Don't know, Austin's on our core team here with Rich and myself, and he diligences basically all our TCGs, and he mops the floor with auto battlers and TCG, and he's a real tough critic. He sat in with like 200 different games, so to hear him say that is really encouraging, because I know there's a lot of anticipation around Parallel. There's a lot of people like myself in our DAO and across the space that are really excited and that are speculating, and it's just great to have the opportunity to have the team on here and have our folks like Ali and Austin who just know how to play these games give their feedback and to see it be encouraging. So I appreciate you guys coming on, and definitely Ali and Austin for taking some time out to make these decks. Hopefully this is helpful for everyone as we continue trying to make great content here about relevant games and games we're excited about here in the space. So as always, appreciate you. And Koji, big shout out, buddy. You made it.
I made it. Well, we'll see. I still have some childcare left in the day, so I don't know. I made it through this this segment at least.
Yeah, I think maybe we can just touch on too, like what are the ways that people can validate and test decks when they get into the client, you know? There's obviously a few different types of game modes that we've alluded to, and maybe let's just be more direct and say like what are the ways that you're going to go out there and get some initial validity that this deck works once you've taken it from deck builder into the actual client.
Awesome. Well, I think that was like all extremely informative, but just wanted to wrap it up. I know we like to do a little giveaway for someone in the chat, and then would love to hear what we've got cooking for next week.
Yeah. Well, I mean, definitely let's get the giveaway going. We can pick out one of the names down there. Yeah, I mean, I think next week we'll maybe roll the dice. I saw some people saying, oh, we want Cathari next, so maybe we'll throw them a bone and do Cathari. I think Cathari is, to me, lore-wise, the most interesting parallel, aesthetically the most interesting parallel. It's just come so far, and the stories are so mind-blowing. You know, you see, because they're clones, you see a character holding his own self while it's dying, and it's like the narrative implications of that are like mind-blowing to me, and just aesthetically have become probably the most distinct and crazy looking parallel in my personal opinion. So I'm really excited to get into like who are the Cathari and what's it all about. The play style is really interesting too. So we'll do that next time, and that'll be great. You know, we'll probably have a similar format to this where you know, we can take a look at Ali and Austin's, you know, decks and what they think that play style shapes up to be. Maybe what are some of the analogs between Hearthstone and Magic. And yeah, we're moving closer to alpha, you know, as well. And that's going to be an exciting time for people to get in there and take decks that they've been cooking up and put them into, you know, me versus AI, me versus another player, me versus, you know, different types of game modes. All these things are going to be really fun to see people take these theories and strategies and actually have them, you know, proven or disproven. So we are continuing to approach that. So I guess that's the other just update on that piece, you know, bug squashing, but, you know, very, very close on that front.
And thank you all in this chat for metaphorically holding me while I die. So.
Is Cathari next week? Yeah, we'll do Cathari next week. Bunch of Ken dolls running around in skin tight suits. Not wrong. I mean, not entirely incorrect, but
now I'm in.
Yeah, they're pretty neat nonetheless. Yeah, it's an exciting faction for sure. It's not as cool as Marcolian, but it's close.
Yeah, before we sign off, the DAO approved 500 into the payload from RPD, and we can use it on one of our streams coming up. So,
oh yeah,
that'll be fun. Yeah.
So whenever we want to do that, we have the approval, and I think that'll be a lot of fun to just roll the dice a little bit and see if we can pull something.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. But yeah, thanks everyone for hopping in. I hope it was a good discussion. I think this format with these two going through their decks is a really cool way to approach it, get their perspective, see how someone who isn't, you know, in the client looks at it, and get some real, you know, serious card chops looking at these cards.
Sure. All right, and just to get the ball rolling, did a few scrolls through and generated from the chat. I think BVED has just been dominating the chat. So every roll that I've done is dropped on him. So it looks like he gets this week's giveaway.
Lucky Bobbin.
My God.
I know.
Just grinding it out.
Anymore. We need to nerf him. We don't need to buff him.
Yeah, disqualified from next week.
Definitely disqualified permanently. Like let's just crank it up here. No, that's cool though.
All right, well, thanks guys. Great chatting again. Thanks Ali and Parallel team for joining us this week's episode again.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks.
Cheers, everyone.
See you.